Embers of Hope by Neon Sanketsu, Chapter 9, A Slippery Slope. They say absolute power corrupts. Absolutely. Unlimited power, even more so. Does it though? Does it really? Take me, for instance. I have lived for thousands of years, yet your world still stands. I command armies of Grim, yet your world still stands. I could snuff your kind out with a snap of my fingers, yet your world still stands. You call me a villain, monster, devil, evil, spawn of the blackest pit. I am all those things and more. However, I am also a mother. There are things, people that I hold dear. There are limits to my cruelty. I do not take pleasure in pain. I do not delight in torture. I do what I must because I must. I had no interest in you nor your petty schemes until now. You poor fool. You think you know what a monster is? You have no idea, but you will. I'm going to show you. A future conversation. A slippery slope. Ground. That was Naruto's first thought as he and Weiss came crashing down out to Raven's portal at Mach 1. Blue eyes bulged. One hand slammed down to catch himself. The other pivoted his body to shield her from the worst of their fall. Chakra flared. Aura shrieked in protest. Or perhaps that was Weiss. Naruto couldn't be sure. Regardless, his last-minute intervention turned their uncontrolled tumble into more of a graceless dive than a fatal crush, one that sent the two of them skidding into an open pair of arms rather than the hard, unyielding floor. "You've returned," a gruff voice greeted them. "Hey, Uncle Hazel." The boy grinned blearily up at his savior. "Nice catch. Really didn't want to hit the floor at that speed." "Herk, herk," Weiss groaned against his chest. "Let's never do that again." "Hey, all well that ends well. What? No hello for me?" Raven muttered just out of sight. "No, that's fine. Ignore me. I only saved your life." Naruto waved a single arm her way. "Thanks, Auntie." His world was still spinning when a chuckling Hazel lowered the two of them back to the ground. Weiss didn't look much better off for it, even if it did look like there were three of her. Naruto shook his head, willing the trio of Sneegirls before him to resolve into one. Gradually they did. He winced at what he saw there. She was in a right state. Her already pale skin was flecked with dust and soot. Her outfit all but ruined. Oh dear, she was going to go absolutely berserk. Girl liked her combat skirt. Never mind Missy Mertonester. He'd have to pick that up when he went back. "Might I ask why you were moving that fast?" Hazel inquired. "I nearly didn't catch you in time." Naruto whistled innocently. "There may have been an explosion." "Of course," Raven huffed. "Let me guess, Tyrion? Was it that obvious? No, never mind. I'm only back for a bit." He dusted himself off and shook his cape, still smoldering faintly from his shoulders. "Just dropping Weiss off before I rendezvous with Winter. I'll be right back. Oh, speaking of which, Auntie!" Weiss made a grab for him, but he slipped out of her grasp and bolted towards Raven. Really, Tyrion might have gone a little too crazy with the fire back in the mansion. He'd have to put that out later. But for now, red eyes narrowed upon him as he scooted over. "What do you want, brat?" Naruto dug a hand into the heavy satchel slung over his shoulder. "I got you something. Hope you like it." Those blood-red orbs watched him like her namesake as he presented it to her. Raven valued precisely few things in this world: strength, money, survival, family, her own life, not necessarily in that order. For all her bluster and bravado, however, she was something of a softie. She loved Yang more than anything. She cared about Ruby. She was even fond of him in her own awkward way. She just wasn't the most expressive person if you didn't know her, but when you did, her tales were all too easy to read. "Here you go." He opened it for her and watched her eyes sparkle. "Didn't have time to wrap it back in the mansion when I raided his safe, but I hope you like it." She leaned over, her jaw clicked open. "You little shit, when did you have time to do this?" "What can I say?" He grinned. "I've got fast feet. Happy birthday." "Naruto, no." Weiss sighed. "Bad. That's an awful gift." "You think I only stole a couple million lien?" Raven all but dragged him into her bosom with a squeal. "Best nephew ever. I'm your only nephew." Lungs, ribs, being crushed. She squeezed him harder. "Don't care." Against all odds, he managed to wriggle away, somehow leaving Raven to fawn over her newfound fortune. The very moment he did, he found himself faced with an obstacle of a more wintry variety, because Weiss was looking at him now. both arms crossed before her chest. Her brow had gone stormy. One foot tapped impatiently against the ground as she glared pale daggers at him. It didn't have anything to do with the money, he knew that. Weiss hated her father. She was cross with him for another reason, one he didn't understand. He wondered what it was. So, any chance you'd be willing to play with Ruby and the others till I get back? The little Schnee shook her head, ponytail flailing. I'll wait until you return. Weiss? No. She stamped a foot. I will wait. I am not done with you either. She grabbed a fistful of his singed jacket before he could slip away. You put a grim in me. Naruto looked left, Naruto looked right. Naruto balked. Me? Yes, you. Did he do that? He didn't remember doing that. It felt like something he'd remember. He really couldn't recall. When she left back then, she had been so frightened and terrified even. He vaguely remembered grabbing her by the wrist, and then trying to talk to her, only for her to yank her hand away. Had he done something then? And did his power have a mind of its own? He couldn't be sure. His expression must have betrayed him, because the fierce anger in her eyes softened just a touch. You weren't even aware of it? Of course he wasn't. What is it, a parasite or something? Weiss flinched and touched the hand to her head. Please don't call Venom that. He doesn't like it. Another brow rose. Wait, it's a he, and you've named it? What did I miss? Another thought occurred to him. Then, wait, something he created, a part of himself, of the grim power he commanded. Do I owe child support? I'll pay, I swear. You absolute dolt. Weiss flushed to the very roots of her hair. Don't imply things like that. Her right eye twitched. Damn it, don't call him Papa. Naruto choked. Pa? Uh-huh. A new voice interjected with a polite cough. This is all quite fascinating, but might I intercede for a moment? Naruto would have said something to that effect, were it not for the fact that he didn't recognize the speaker. He turned and glimpsed another man near his mother's throne, one he'd not noticed until this very moment. Until Uncle Hazel, this one seemed to be unlike Uncle Hazel, this one seemed to be an older gentleman, clad in dark garments and a tattered lab coat, with wild eyes and wilder hair. He had seen better days. Crazy Bastard looked downright giddy to see them. You fork even. And who is this? He asked. Where's Mom, anyway? Salem is indisposed at the moment. Hazel amended with a grimace of his own. Allow me to introduce Dr. Merlot. The giant waved a hand in his direction as all eyes turned towards the madman. He claims to be the foremost expert on all things grim. He's recently been recruited into our ranks. A blonde brow rose. How recently? Hazel exhaled aloud in a long-suffering sigh. An hour ago. He walked right up to our doorstep. Unfortunately, the crazy bastard took that as his cue to approach them. So this is the one. Fascinating. He certainly seemed affable enough, even with those ghastly cybernetics. His right eye was purely cybernetic, as was his right arm, a ghastly thing made of red and metal alike. His smile was entirely human, however, and another matter entirely. Absolutely fascinating. I've already prepared some tests, if you don't mind. Weiss shrank back. I'd rather you don't. Naruto swung an arm outward, pulling her behind him. Now. Merlot saw his fear and chuckled softly. I'll just be taking a bit of blood, dear child. Nothing untowards. You have my word. The blonde hissed. You stick her with that needle, and I'll stick you with a scalpel. Perhaps another time, then. The man retreated with a bow. Naruto flicked an anxious glance at Hazel. No harm will come to Weiss or anyone else while you're gone. The giant put in quickly. Rest assured, I will be watching this one very closely. Harm them? How rude! Merlot squawked and flailed his arms. To even suggest I would imperil the discovery of the century. Naruto pinched the brow of his nose. Rivet, get me a porter to Winter, please. I'm feeling stabby. His aunt scoffed, but unsheathed her sword regardless. Her blade cut a line in the air. Go on, Scoot. Weiss reeled him back in before he could and buried her head in his chest. A curious dampness registered against his skin, but in a rare epiphany he held his tongue. She sniffled once and he bit his lip to keep any word from spilling out. Something told him he'd be eviscerated for calling her on the carpet right now. Nope, silence was golden. And less so when her lips alighted on his cheek. It was quick, chased over in an instant. Blue eyes fluttered rapidly. What? Come back safely, won't you? She leaned back with a whisper. I'll be very cross with you if you get hurt. Sure thing. Typical wise speak. He barely understood her sometimes. Still, he patted her head once. I'll be back before you know it. A crimson portal tear opened for Naruto, and with a final parting pat on Wise's head, he stepped back and ran forward. A single leap carried him through. As such, he missed the scarlet streak that shot into the room as he made his departure. He didn't have word. He wasn't its target. Nay, it only had eyes for a certain Schnee. Wise! Ruby, you dolt! Let go of me! Salem felt her word crumbling piece by painful piece. The Queen of the Grim stared at the test in her hand and felt her world come undone. Her legs buckled as she sank down into her throne. This wasn't happening. This couldn't be happening. It shouldn't be possible. She had tried. She had checked. She had been certain. Years had passed. Multiple attempts failed. All for naught. In truth, she'd all but given up on it, thinking it a remnant of her past. A little more. She would never have children again. It was simply a fact of life. Naruto was her darling boy, and she was content to raise him as her own, even if it meant she could never give him a brother or sister. But she'd been feeling so strange the last few weeks, and she was late, not to mention her regular. So she tested herself on a whim. She hadn't thought anything would come of it until it had. The gods were probably laughing at her fear. Pretentious pricks. She sank down onto her bed with a world-weary sigh. All right, girl, breathe. In, out, in, out. Would the child be safe? Would it be healthy? Her body was corrupted even more than before. Immortality or no, childbirth was a dangerous process. She could not die from it, but her child could. Her last breath had been a painful one, and she nearly lost the baby to complications. Now, eons later, she wasn't sure another child of hers would survive. Never mind that. How would her son react? Would he feel jilted, replaced? Naruto was a sweet boy, but jealousy did awful things to the best people. But a baby? Just the thought of losing another child threatened to paralyze her. Salem! The door slammed open with a devastating crunch. Oh, no. No. She couldn't face him now. Not him. Anyone but him. Ozma, for who else could be, came storming in, cane in hand. No doubt his expression was thunderous. He certainly sounded angry enough. She dared not look at him. Magic cracked in the air, a sure sign of his stress, but she cared not a whit for it. Her thoughts spiraled down into a dark, terrible place as she hugged her arms to herself. I cannot believe you would do this, he wailed at her, unaware of her happiness, her misery. Attacking Atlas in the middle of the night. Have you gone mad? Why? Salem sniffled. Why are you crying? She raised her hand and hiccuped. Ozma came closer, not quite understanding. What is that? Her smile was unbearably fragile as she showed him the test. Surprise! A pail fell over the room. His cane clattered to the floor. When she looked up, she saw his arm. Oh my! In hindsight, he hadn't thought it possible for her to have children anymore. The corruption had taken its toll on her over the eons, body and soul. That hadn't stopped them from trying again, of course, but he'd begun to think their efforts were in vain, and yet here she was, lost, afraid, alone. He dared a tentative smile and took her hand in his own. There, don't cry. Salem was the Queen of the Grim. She was mighty. She was terror. She was death incarnate. She could burn the world to the ground if she so wished. Men feared her. Women wanted to be her. None could stand in her way. None could kill her. And yet in this, for the first time in eons, she was truly powerless. I'm terrified, she babbled. Osman exhaled softly and took her in his arms. I gather that. You do realize James is going to be very cross with me. The Winter Maiden was easy to find. Resistance was minimal at best. With a madman on the loose and Atlas in an uproar, no one bothered to stop a woman in uniform. It didn't even occur to them said uniform might be stolen, or worse, that she might be an imposter. No one noticed her stark golden eyes, dark hair, or arrogant smile. No one thought to question her as she took an elevator and descended into the bowels of the city. And if every door opened for her on the way, and the cameras just so happened to miss her, and definitely sus. Cinderfall hummed softly to herself as she watched the floor flash by. Really? She huffed, tucking a strand of ebony hair behind one ear. Can't this thing go any faster? As if to answer that very question, a distant explosion rattled the world above. A sigh followed. Guess not. Tyrion was very, very, very good at what he did. Truly, there was no one better at causing chaos. Raiding the Schnee Manor had only been the beginning. He'd been leading Ironwood and the entire Atlas military on a merry chase for the better part of 3 hours now. Not taking lives, of course. Naruto had been adamantly against that, not causing chaos all the same. Really, if those fools couldn't catch one man, no matter how skilled he might be, then they weren't much of a military after all. Granted, he had Watts helping him and hampering his every effort, but really, it spoke more to the military's incompetence that those two hadn't been captured yet, and they wouldn't be. The moment they were in peril, they hopped back through a portal to the Grimlands. Raven's semblance was bullshit, but it was their brand of bullshit. Important distinction that. No doubt Naruto had already used it to hightail it back home to Mommy Dearest once he pried his little princess from Jackie's grubbly little hands. Even if he had not, she trusted him to look after himself. Any plans he had beyond that were his own, not known to her. And while the prince was away, the adults would play, even if she wasn't an adult yet. Bah, semantics. This was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, and she would not waste it. With this, she would leap past all the rest. Remarkably, someone actually remembered to guard Freya, for when the elevator door opened, Cinder found herself face to face with two soldiers. One of them balked behind his helmet. "Halt! You're not supposed to be here!" He gurgled and toppled backwards as an arrow sprouted from his throat. His companion barely managed to draw their rifle before Cinder was on him. Her first blade slashed it down in a shower of sparks. The other caught his neck and he collapsed with a bloody gurgle. They expired within moments, the both of them. Pity, but she couldn't afford witnesses. She had her task here, and now was the time to strike. Dead men tell no tales. Naruto would have been furious with her, killing solely for the sake of preserving her identity. In the long run, it wouldn't matter. Once Salem's plan was enacted, all of Revenant would know their names, but for now, she had been commanded to keep herself hidden, to not reveal her face to the public. Watts could erase an electronic presence she left behind, but memories, those could not be removed so easily. Stepping over their corpses, Cinder pulled her hair free from the bun she'd fashioned it into. Ghastly thing, waves of ebony spilled down her shoulders as she walked, hips swaying, a small smile plucked at her lips. Much better. Walk to the end of the hall and take the first door on your left. The voice of Watts crackled through her earpiece. Make it quick. We're leading Ironwood around by the nose up here, but it's only a matter of time before he realizes what we're up to. No need to get your mustache in a twist, old man. She forebore the urge to roll her eyes. I'll see it done. Did you find what you came for? Quite, a chuckle answered. Petra had some fascinating research tucked away. I'll make fine use of this penny. Don't choke on your aspirations, Doctor. Brat. The connection cut with a squawk of silence. Cinder followed his instructions to the letter. From there, it was a simple matter to find Freya's chamber and rouse her from her sleeping pod. Poor old hag, wasting away like this. No longer. Rise and shine, sleeping beauty, she hummed, eyes narrowing in anticipation as the maiden awoke. You've had your time in the sun, but now that time is up. As expected, the woman before her was slow to stir. Of course she was. She wasn't long for this world. Why else would Ironwood keep her locked away here? The power of a maiden wasn't meant to be sealed away like some cowardly craven. It was born to be used, like the elements themselves, and they thought to lock it away. Ha! Just the thought of it made her sick. Power should be used. Yes, bleary blue eyes blinked up at her. I've been waiting here for some time, I think. What was I waiting for? Cinder smiled and conjured a knife of burning glass behind her back. Me. A single strike would be enough, more than enough. Oh, another blink followed the last. Was I? I had a job to do. I was supposed to protect the power of the maiden until I was ready. She tilted her head as if listening to some voice only she could hear. I worry I may have lost track of time, but you can tell James I'm ready now. Those eerie glowing eyes fixed upon her now with an ancient weight. Tell me, girl, are you the one I've been waiting for? The knife vanished in Cinder's grasp. Fight or flight warred within her, and locked themselves into a stalemate as the Winter Maiden awaited her answer. Wait, was this really happening? She didn't even have to lift a finger. It was almost too good to be true. If she could take the power without striking a blow, well, it would be ideal, more than ideal. Ironwood would suspect some form of intrusion after what he'd been done to his guards. But without any injuries to his precious maiden, he would have no way of knowing who had done the deed. He wouldn't be able to prove anything. His would be the ravings of a madman. None would listen to him. I am. The words tumbled out of her mouth before she could think to hold them back. I've waited my entire life for this moment. Some say revenge is a dish best served cold. For what Atlas had done to her, Cinder's vengeance would be boiling hot. You have, haven't you? Strangely enough, Freya nodded. I can see it in your eyes. What is your name? Cinder. She wasn't sure why she gave it. Didn't matter. The hag would be dead soon. Such a lovely name. The woman's worn face creased into a small smile. And why do you crave my power? Will you use it, or will you shut yourself away as I have? A bitter chuckle escaped her. Without this might, I am nothing. Many have come to me to seek it. What makes you any different? Without you, I am nothing. Cinder flinched violently as a phantom pain shot through her neck. Old scars that had yet to heal reared their ugly heads, threatening to drag her down, back into her past. No, stop. She shook the memory away and mastered herself. She refused to show weakness even here before this dying woman. She wasn't nothing, not anymore. She didn't have to run now. She was mighty. She was powerful. She held the power of Salem herself and would be betrothed to her queen's son. Soon she would have even more. Whether or not this old hag cooperated was immaterial. Her compliance wasn't a factor. I will use it. She hissed the words through clenched teeth. Freya regarded her with burning blue eyes. And for whose sake will you wield my power? For myself, she breathed, pride burning through her veins. For power, to make my enemies tremble, and to protect those you love. Of course. Wait, no. Cinder's smile died an ugly death, and her pale face burned hotter than any flame. I didn't say that. Come now, dear. Freya regarded her with a bemused sigh. I'm no spring chicken, but even I remember how it feels to fall in love. It's written all over your face. You want to protect what's yours, as any young woman should. When she tried to protest, a wrinkled hand flitted out to touch her head, rubbing her dark hair. How adorable! The gesture was so simple, so familiar, that Cinder bristled. Rose had done the same thing, worn the same pitying expression in his final moments, before she ripped her sword from his chest. It was too much. Cinder flailed her arms and skidded backwards with a scowl, but no immediate attack was forthcoming, only muted laughter. It's a boy, isn't it? Or a girl? I'm not one to judge. Her face flared. Silence, do not mock me, you old crone. Ah, young love, tell me about him, won't you? It was not a question. Why? Cinder's gaze flitted to the exit. Are you trying to buy time for yourself? Rest assured, I'm not trying to stall you. Her smile creased. If you're here, then help isn't coming. Indulge an old woman's curiosity. Think of it as my last request. I refused. The knife came back, and this time Cinder brandished it. I think I'll just kill you, take your power, and be done with this face. You could, Freya allowed. I would be sure to think of someone else, however. Anyone but you. Damn it. Damn her to hell. She had her. She should have killed her the moment she opened her eyes. Instead, she indulged in her weakness, in thinking her a harmless old crone. Freya was not harmless, even now. Cinder could feel the bite of frost in the air. If she attacked, the woman would put up a fight. Even with her new power, could she win against a fully realized maiden? Her shoulders slumped. His name is Naruto. He's just a boy. She looked away, dark hair falling over her eyes. A little younger than me. He's decent. Kind. A rueful smile tugged at the corner of her mouth. He sees the best in people even when he shouldn't. The smile died an ugly death when she thought about what awaited him. He'll get himself killed because of it someday. He sounds like such a nice lad. Freya cooed, touching one hand to her cheek. I would have liked to meet him. Reminds me of my dear William. Cinder didn't let it end there. Someone needs to protect him. And must that someone be you? Yes. Blazing hands slammed down on either side of the beds, trapping her. Salem understands, but she can't be there for him every second of the day. The others are too soft, too weak. Her forehead slammed against Freya's, molten gold burning into placid blue. They're foolish. They don't know the world like I do. Remnant is dark. It is cold. It is cruel. I know it. I've lived through the hell firsthand, and I refuse to let another suffer the same. Be that as it may, no, I am talking. You listen. When the elder woman frowned, Cinder shouted her down. I will burn the entire cities to the ground before I let anyone hurt him, so you can give me your power, or you can die screaming with his enemies. It was the right thing to say. Freya leaned back, eyes shining with no fear, but triumph. Tell me, dear girl, do you believe in destiny? I don't have to run now. 6 words, a desperate plea from her past, burned in the back of Cinder's brain like a brand. She grit her teeth against it. She would not run from this. This was her burden to bear, her power, her duty. Freya would never speak these words to anyone else. They need never know. They would never know, for she would speak of this to no one else, not even Naruto himself. Yes, Freya lowered her arms and her aura with it. Then I released myself to you, Cinderfall. She graced her with a careworn smile. Be better than I was. Without warning, her left hand lashed out, seizing the younger girl by the wrist. Her fingers dug in, and she yanked her forward, hard enough to bruise. Something surged up the length of her linked arms and into Cinder's chest. It stole her breath away, leaving a faint plume of white mist as she exhaled, and still Freya did not rush back into her lung. Freya did not relent. Power pulsed up as the aspiring maiden's arm and her body locked up. Air rushed back into her lungs with a wordless hiss, but even then she couldn't bring herself to move. Her very soul burned. For a moment, she was a weak little girl again, unable to move as the Winter Maiden drew her into her arms. I am an old woman, Freya rasped as Cinder trembled helplessly in her grasp. Let these be my final words to you. Protect your family, or, failing that, die with them. Do not linger over long as I have. Her eyes softened, and flames of her eyes flickering. A wind-swept candle on its final breath. Loneliness is such an awful thing. Just like that, she passed on. Her body went limp in her cot, and Cinder felt the arms holding her go slack. She tried to speak, only for her throat to close. A faint presence touched her shoulder for the merest of moments. More a fleeting feeling of sorrow, and then the old woman was gone. Control rushed back, and she tried to stand on stiff legs. Dark hair hid her face for but a moment. Frost flickered at her fingertips, gradually encroaching on the floor. A sudden breeze swept through the room, lifting her ebony tresses like a dark halo around her face. Laughter tumbled from her lips, and so the wheel of destiny spun even onward. Golden eyes flicked with flames, the searing power gladly given to her. She fished a scroll from her pocket, dialed a number, and held it to her ear. Raven, portal, now. Credit where it was due, the bandit answered quickly. Not even a second passed before a crimson tear opened beside her. A triumphant smile bloomed across her lips. With this, her place as Salem second would be all but assured. Well, maybe not second. That role fell to Naruto. Third, really. Bronze was better than nothing. With one final lingering glance back to Freya's corpse, Cinder stepped towards her ticket home. Paused. In death, Freya looked small, tiny even. Here was a lonely woman who had died a lonely death. No one would miss her. No one would mourn her, except perhaps Ironwood. But he would bemoan the loss of the Winter Maiden, not the woman wielding the power. An idea bloomed in the back of Cinder's head, an insidious little scheme that Salem herself would have been proud of. Her smile turned vicious. Yeah, screw Ironwood. Heels clicked against the frozen floor. She turned back and scooped up her still form, pulling her in her arms. Freya was light. There was almost no weight to her body, none at all. She would give this one a burial. It was the least she could do. A body, none at all. And she would give this one a final act of kindness from one maiden to another. If it left Ironwood scratching his head and wondering whether she was alive or not, well, all the better. Head held high, she turned and stalked back towards Raven's portal, then through it. The gate closed a minute later, leaving not a trace of her presence. She would remember Freya's words. No one would touch her family. None would hurt Naruto. If they dared, she would see them burn. Mother, the fear was gone. Willow couldn't feel it, not at all. She wondered where it must have gone. Oh wait, something had replaced it. As she knew this feeling, her eyes snapped open, burning with an angry fire she had felt once before. She pushed herself upright, and so too did a soft snarl push its way past her now pale lips. Tell me where he is, she demanded of her daughter. Tell me where that weaselly, wretched little bastard is hiding. Jakishny awoke and found himself shackled to a wall. Alarm set in at once, and he immediately began to struggle, as any sane individual would when finding themselves in such a situation. But the wall was solid stone, and the chains that bound him painfully rough. He rubbed his wrists raw within seconds. A whimper of distress echoed into the darkened cell beyond. Someone had devastated him for everything beyond a pair of black boxers. Gone was his fancy suit, his watch and scroll. Even his precious clip-on tie had been torn away from him. Where at the end of it, the man might have felt some semblance of confidence in his situation. Chains could be broken after all, locks could be picked. No, it was the shadows beyond his cell that terrified Jackie so. He had been left in a world of complete darkness, with not even so much as a torch for illumination. He feared the dark, for it was in the darkness that true monsters were born. Only the faint glowing stones of his cell offered him any real hope of light, and even that only served to highlight the absence of it beyond the bars. What he saw beyond terrified him, for a pair of glowing red eyes regarded him from the darkness. They were not human. His heart skipped a beat. A whimper forced itself from his lips. Now, Ashni does not cry, dear Jackas. Someone crooned just out of sight. Ashni does not whimper, Jackas. The faint click of heels against stone drew closer, causing his heart to race anew. Ashni does not hate, Jackas. You should know better. What is the meaning of this? He snarled into the shadows. Release me at once. Meaning? A light, glittering laugh greeted him. There is no meaning here, and no, I think not. You've given your last order. What? He swallowed his fear and tried not to stutter the words. What do you want with me? More laughter. What do I want? Vengeance, pure and simple. Vengeance. Had he been captured by the White Fang, his memory was a mess of twisting corridors and shadows. He remembered being struck by the little upstarts, hands of shadows dragging him down into a pit. When he tried to reach for the rest, his thoughts slipped through his fingers. Fear bubbled up in its place, practically fracturing his already fragile resolve. Anger threatened to burn through that entirely. They couldn't do this to him. He was Jackie Snee. The world bowed to him. He would not be treated like this. He would not be held for ransom. They would rue the day they crossed him. Who are you? He snarled. Only cowards hide in the shadows. The laughter became an outright giggle, a delightful noise that seemed to stretch on forever. It bounded off the walls, the floor, the ceiling. It echoed long and loud in his ears, growing louder with each passing moment, ringing like a clarion bell. Cowards, how rich, coming from the biggest coward of them all. Show yourself! Finally, the laughter trailed off in a soft purr. As you wish. They stepped into the light and revealed themselves. Do you recognize me now, dear husband? Willow. It was his wife, and yet not his wife. The last he'd seen of her, she was a withered and emaciated thing, a broken woman trying to drink herself into an early grave, or starve herself to death. A stranger stood in her place, a familiar stranger perhaps, but a stranger nonetheless. He recognized the shape of her face and her voice, but little more. She looked younger, stronger, her chin held high with confidence, just as she had been in her youth, before he'd beaten the bravery out of her. But now she was changed. Those bright blue eyes were burning rubies in the darkness, fixed firmly on him. Her already pale skin had gone ghost white, rimming with red veins. Her once conservative braided hair was freed from its tight braid to frame her face like a curtain of freshly fallen ashen snow. A pair of pale horns curled behind her head, forming a ghastly caricature of a crown. Gone were the colors of the Schnee family. She had forsaken them for a black and white combat dress with a deep plunging neckline and a single circular belt looped around her waist. She looked more a monster than a huntress, more alive than she'd ever been. He had a feeling it would bode poorly for him. What are you doing, woman? Release me! All those years, she spoke over him, voice cracking with power. More than a decade of misery at your hands. The soft click of her heels filled the room anew as she came to the bars. Do you remember what you said to me? Do you remember the pain you caused me? Oh, do you even care? The key slotted into the lock, and with a ponderous groan, the door in his cell opened. Willow's knee strode through. His confidence made one last stand. You will let me go, or you will rue the day. Sharp nails, claws, and cracked across his face, obliterating his right eye. Jackie screamed as half his world darkened forevermore. He shrieked and spat and swore until he'd gone hoarse. He thrashed and kicked and bucked against his chains, yet still they helped. In the end, he was left to slump against them, defeated and spent. A hand closed around his hair, yanking him upright. Tears dribbled from his remaining eye. Clawed nails pushed against it in the against it in dire warning. "You do not command me!" The monster that had once been his wife crowed at him. "Try to do so again, and I will make another piece of you." He nodded. It burned to do so, but he could hurt her in other ways. "Is this what you have fallen to, woman?" A cruel smile twisted his lips. "You've made yourself a monster." And hers did not falter. "Sometimes it takes a monster to kill a monster." "Ah," he cocked a pallid brow. "But whatever will the children think?" Here at last, her smile dimmed. "Not much." Jacques turned his head as a fresh set of footfalls echoed in the dungeon. The torchlight approached, and soon enough it beheld the one bearing it. He squinted, and sure enough, a familiar face stared back at him from the gloom. His remaining eye bulged, even as the other continued to weep bloody tears. Anger mounted. A fitful fury sparkled back to life in him. It was the blasted boy from before, the one who had captured him, perhaps a bit dirtier and a great deal angrier, but there could be no forgetting his face. His eyes burned like twin cobalt diamonds. "You!" "Me!" LeBlanc Pierrot smacked his lips and held the torch higher, casting shifting shadows across his face. "So this is where you went?" He turned to face Willow with a sigh. "Winter was worried. Didn't she tell you not to lose yourself?" "Do not think to take this from me, boy." Willow snarled at him, baring her teeth in an angry rickets of a grin. "He is mine. I will have my vengeance. Careful now. You may be new here, but like I said, don't lose yourself." Golden hair bleached itself white as his face turned ashen. Wild black veins pushed up from his whiskered visage. Sapphire eyes shimmered into scarlet, bringing with it a rush of pressure. The torch in his hand guttered out, and for a moment Jacques glimpsed a monster in the dark, a horrible creature with 9 tails. He nearly foamed at the mouth. 2 of them, and there were more. Jacques wanted to cry, "Oh gods, he was going to die down here, wasn't he?" Willow saw it too, because she instantly stepped back. "What are you?" "Just a kid," Naruto hummed. "No one special." Jacques had his doubts about that. This thing was undoubtedly younger than Willow, yet his scowl put the older woman in her place all the same. Abruptly, the killing intent abated and the torch roared back to life. When it did, there was not a sign of the monster the boy had been. He was undoubtedly human again. At least, he appeared to be. There wasn't so much as a hint of what he'd been before. Ashen hair was blonde once more, his tan skin full of life and light, blue eyes bright and blue and happy, as a teen's should be. Monsters, his mind glimmered. This tower is filled with monsters. The world was doomed. He was merely the first victim, the first of many. It was too much. Jacques lost what little control he had over his stomach and retched over the floor, wasted and gasping for air. "I won't breathe a word of this to anyone." Naruto patted Willow's shoulder. "Do what you have to do." With a whistle and a jaunty tune, he walked back the way he'd come the dark, only to pause. I'm really not one for killing people, much less torture, you know." A red eye peered over his shoulder as he intoned the words. "But given what you've done, what I've heard of you, I think you deserve this. You were a cruel man, Jacques Lee. You're going to die a powerless one, alone, forgotten. How does it feel?" Jacques choked as his tormentor sauntered up the steps. "Uncouth little." "That's right, Winter. Weiss and Whitley are beyond your reach." Willow's smile returned in force. "Our youngest is sound asleep upstairs, and I will not let the girls see what happens to you. They will not know this side of me. Perhaps that is for the best. I have no need to be gentle with you." Her brow creased. "Certainly not after the stunt you just pulled." Jackie gulped. Willow saw it and pounced. "Is this what it feels like to be in control?" She tittered softly, hiding her smile behind the other palm. "I must confess, I rather like it." He bristled and tore his head out of her grasp. Willow's hand lashed out immediately, catching him by the chin. "Such a tragic accident you had, dying in that fire," she cooed, caressing his cheek as though to mourn his passing, "while he was still here. They never found your body. As your wife, the SDC will return to me, of course. I'll be sure to run it fairly." A pause as she tilted her head. "Or perhaps I'll run it to the ground just to spite you. I've not decided yet. Once the thought might have burned him. Now he just wanted to get away. Now let's not do anything we might regret. I'm sure we can talk about..." He choked as her fingers slipped down and squeezed his throat. Regret? Her right eye burned brighter still. You have no say in the matter. Was this to be his end? It couldn't be. It just couldn't. He was the most powerful man on Remnant. You've gone mad. Her claws came out again, carving into his nose like a turkey. Mad? No, I'm quite sane. I was terrified of this, you know. She hummed, uncaring of the high cries that followed. When winter poured the foul concoction down my throat, I thought I was going to die, but I survived. I will continue to survive. She leaned forward, pressing her head to his, nose brushing his own. I will reconnect with my daughters and my son. I will live. I will find love again, if only to spite you. A faint smile creased her lips. And I know just where to start. She stepped back, but only to savor the moment. And you, Jacques Gale, an exhalation. Well, action speaks louder than words. No, I believe we have some time to catch up to do. And Willow advanced on him, smile sharp and eyes gone red. 15 years of misery, Jacques. That's 4,745 days of suffering. Her smile turned cruel. I do hope you haven't lost count. The rasp of drawn steel filled the room. Too late, Jackie saw the holster at her belt, beheld the deadly serrated edge of a knife glimmering in the faint light. He also saw the lightning dust shimmering across its tip. Because you're about to remember every single one. His screams echoed long and loud into the night. Previews. Quite all right, dears. Polygamy used to be all the rage, or so I've been told. Winter and Y sputtered, Mother! Mercury shook his head. And another girl joins the harem. Lucky bastard. Nato sputtered, What? I don't have a harem. Are you blind? Ilya, why are you on my back? Warm, comfy. Shut up and let me sleep, stupid. Nato slumped a fist into the air. Aha! I finally beat you. It's the Schnee. It's the Schnee. Shoot her. Boys, you really don't want to do this. The leaders didn't listen. Nope, of course not. Masks! All right. Why smiled as she regarded the terrorists. It was all teeth. Have it your way. Mask. Somewhere deep inside her soul, Venom absolutely cackled. Copy. Darkness boiled over her body from head to toe. Her foe shrieked. What the hell is that? Why, is there a battleship on our doorstep? They are the enemy, Ospin. The headmaster raised a mug to his lips. Are they, James? Are they really? Neat. Naruto blinked. Oh, all right. I'm gonna be a big brother. That's cool. Yang grinned. All right, kitty cat. Told you he would faint. I win the bet. Pay up. Blake slapped a wad of linen into her hands. End of chapter 9.